The next evening, California arrived at the diner, her heart racing as she took in the vintage decor: black and white checkered floors, red vinyl booths, neon lights casting a warm glow over the room. Buddy Holly was playing softly in the background, and California felt like she'd stepped into another time, a place suspended between past and present. When she spotted Susan entering, she felt a thrill that only grew as Susan crossed the room, her smile lighting up the space in a way that made everything else fade. They slipped into a booth, ordering burgers and milkshakes, and California found herself caught up in Susan's laughter, the warmth in her eyes, the way she seemed to fill every empty space with something real, something that felt like it had always belonged. After dinner, a soft, dreamy tune began to play on the jukebox, and California noticed Susan's gaze drifting toward the small dance floor in the corner. Without thinking, she reached out, holding her hand open. "Dance with me?" Susan's smile widened, and she took California's hand, letting her lead her to the floor. They moved together, their steps slow, almost hesitant, as if testing the boundaries of the space between them. The music was low, wrapping around them, and California felt her heart pounding, every nerve alive with the quiet thrill of being so close to her. Their hands entwined, and as they swayed, California met Susan's gaze, her breath catching as she took in the soft curve of her smile, the warmth in her eyes. The world around them faded, until it was just the two of them, wrapped in the gentle rhythm of the song. Without thinking, California leaned in, brushing her lips against Susan's, a tentative kiss that held all the longing and hope she'd kept buried for so long. Susan kissed her back, gentle but sure, as if she'd been waiting for this too. They pulled back slowly, their foreheads resting together, both of them breathing softly, their hands still clasped. California opened her eyes, and in that moment, she knew this was something real, something worth holding on to. In the soft glow of the diner, they held each other close, swaying to the music, letting themselves fall into the quiet wonder of a love they'd only just begun to discover. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of laughter, quiet nights, and discovering what it felt like to fall in love, fully and deeply. California couldn't quite believe it herself. The days had slipped by with a lightness she'd forgotten was possible, each moment with Sue an anchor that felt more solid than anything she'd known before. They'd spent countless evenings exploring Riverside together, finding hidden corners of the city and favorite little spots, like the cozy bistro tucked behind the park, where they'd claimed a window seat as theirs. On Sundays, they often wandered the local farmers market, trying new foods, picking out small plants for Sue's tiny windowsill garden, and sharing stories in between sips of iced coffee and freshly baked pastries. It was as if time had slowed down just enough for them to savor each second. One night, curled up on Sue's couch, wrapped in a worn blanket with fingers laced, they'd begun to talk seriously about their future. Sue had turned to her, her voice soft but certain. "I don't want to keep waking up in separate places. Let's get a place together." California had felt a swell of happiness, mixed with a surprising calm. "I'd like that," she'd replied, squeezing Sue's hand. "More than anything." They'd started looking almost immediately, imagining what their first home together would be like, talking excitedly about color schemes, furniture, and all the tiny details that made the idea real. California loved hearing Sue's visions for their life together: a warm kitchen for Sunday morning pancakes, bookshelves for all of Sue's novels, and a garden where they could plant the flowers Sue so adored. But just as plans began to take shape, everything changed. Bruce, Sue's father, had been diagnosed with cancer, and the news came as a sharp, unexpected blow. He had been in and out of treatment for months, but just a few weeks ago, the doctors had told him there wasn't much more they could do. The decision to move in together suddenly shifted. As Bruce's condition worsened, Sue and California spent more time at his house, supporting him however they could, preparing themselves for the inevitable. In those quiet, difficult moments, California was struck by Sue's quiet resilience, her tenderness even in grief. She was fiercely present, caring for her father despite their strained history, holding his hand when he was awake and whispering reassurances in his darker moments. When Bruce finally passed, the house, with all its memories and sorrows, passed to Sue. And so, in the days after the funeral, as they sifted through his belongings and took care of final arrangements, their plan changed. Instead of looking for an apartment, they made the choice to move into Bruce's house, to breathe new life into it, to make it a home they could both share. For California, the shift felt right, like a path unfolding that neither of them had anticipated. This house was filled with pieces of Sue's past, and moving into it together felt like a way to honor what had been lost while building something new. They'd found each other, and now they were ready to make this place theirs. And as they began that journey, California felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, something she had never known but was beginning to trust might be real. It was a quiet, cloudy afternoon, and the house felt both strange and familiar, like something they had inherited together. California looked around, taking in the creak of the old floorboards, the faint scent of polish and dust that lingered in the air, as if Bruce's presence hadn't quite faded yet. She couldn't help but think how right it felt to be here, even under the weight of grief that still clung to every corner. Moving into this place seemed like the only way forward, a way to help Sue say goodbye, not just to her father, but to the complicated memories he'd left behind. Sue was kneeling in the living room, packing up some of Bruce's things, carefully setting his books in a box. Her shoulders were tense, and her face held the same quiet sorrow that hadn't left since the funeral a few days ago. California crossed the room, settling beside her. "You okay?" she asked softly, resting a hand on Sue's arm. Sue glanced up, her eyes clouded but warm. "Yeah, just a lot to process, you know? I keep thinking about him, about all the things he never said, or that I wanted him to say. I mean, I knew he was never going to come to terms with us, or who I am, really. But part of me kept hoping." California gave her a soft squeeze. "I get it. It's hard to lose someone before you've worked it all out. But we're here now, making this place ours." She looked around, a small smile tugging at her lips. One day, this house is going to be full of new memories, good ones. Sue's expression softened, and she leaned her head on California's shoulder. "You're right. I'm glad we're moving in here. It feels like a fresh start, like we can finally build a life of our own." They were still sitting like that when the knock came at the door, and Sue quickly got up, brushing off her hands. "That'll be Grandma and Grandpa," she said, her voice brightening. California stood, feeling an odd flutter of nerves. She'd met Sue's grandparents briefly at the funeral, but there had been so many people, so many heavy conversations, and she wasn't used to anyone's family being welcoming. But Sue's face lit up as she opened the door, and California relaxed just a little, taking a deep breath. Robin and Roy stepped inside, the warmth in their smiles immediately filling the room. Robin, petite and sprightly with silver hair and a quick smile, wrapped Sue in a tight hug, then turned her warm gaze on California. "Well, there she is," Robin said, stepping forward and pulling California into a hug without hesitation. She smelled like lavender and fresh soap, and California felt an unfamiliar warmth settle over her. Robin pulled back, studying her with a smile. "We've heard so much about you. It's about time we got to meet properly." California felt a bit taken aback, a flush creeping up her cheeks. "Oh, well, thanks. It's, good to meet you both, too." Before she could recover, Roy, a tall man with a steady gaze and a warm laugh that seemed to echo in the small space, stepped forward, clapping her on the shoulder. "Welcome to the family, California," he said, his tone as casual as if he were inviting her to Sunday dinner. "Glad to see Sue so happy. And you two seem like a good match, don't you?" California wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't used to people being so accepting, so open. It left her feeling both exposed and warm from the inside out, as if she were standing in a light she'd never known. Robin looked around, taking in the room, her gaze settling on Sue with a gentle smile. "We're so happy you're making this place your own. It's what Bruce would have wanted to, you know? He might not have said it, but he loved you, honey. He just had his own way of showing it, even if it was, well, complicated." Sue nodded, her eyes shimmering with unspoken emotions. "Thank you, Grandma. It means a lot." They settled into an easy rhythm, with Robin and Roy reminiscing, sharing stories from Sue's childhood, and asking California questions about herself. She answered cautiously, but they never pressed too hard, always knowing just when to ease off, their acceptance unwavering. California found herself feeling strangely at ease, as if she were in the presence of people who didn't see her for her past or her struggles, but simply for who she was beside the woman she loved. At one point, Robin leaned over, her voice soft. "We're proud of you both. I know Bruce wasn't, well, he had his own beliefs, but love is love. And we see that with you too." California swallowed, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected. "Thank you. That means more than you know." When it was time for Robin and Roy to leave, they hugged Sue tightly, whispering a few last words of comfort, then turned to California. Robin pulled her into another hug, and California found herself leaning into it, almost surprised at how comforting it felt. "Take care of each other," Robin whispered, a gentle hand resting on California's shoulder. "You're family now." California nodded, barely trusting herself to speak. She felt Roy's strong, steady hand on her shoulder as he offered a final goodbye, his eyes crinkling with kindness. As the door closed behind them, California stood for a moment, letting the unexpected warmth settle over her. She wasn't used to acceptance, to being folded into a family as if she belonged. But here, in this house with Sue and with Robin and Roy's quiet blessing, she felt something new, a feeling she could only describe as home.